for the executive service, but jobs, one of the first things you're going to look at is if the announcement is open to the public and you're a veteran, you have veterans preference. If you are in the highest best qualified category and you are a veteran and you provide your documentation showing that you have veterans preference and you're qualified, you will make that certificate. And with those announcements that are open to the public, veterans have consideration prior to non-veterans. You still have to qualify, you still have to make sure everything's there, but it gives you a step up in applying to those announcements. If you're looking to get your foot in the door, those are usually the best way to get in. Now, there are some jobs where if you have skills in the private sector or your military skills, like for me, HR, I was HR and then a medical service corps officer. So it was kind of an easy translation for me to be able to get in a little bit higher level as an HR specialist coming in. But sometimes you start at the ground up. If you're looking for an announcement that's open to current federal employees, and then it talks about, 30% disabled veterans, Schedule A, VRA, they start throwing out all these acronyms, all these weird things that you're like, what the heck is that? USA Jobs actually does a pretty good job of explaining each of those hiring paths, is what they call them, and how to qualify for those. But typically those are not going to be your entry level positions. Those are going to be that next step up. So it's important to make sure that you recognize of where your skill set is, what you have that translates, and knowing that once you get your foot in the door, you can always move up. And it takes a little bit of time, but it's doable. And once you're in, it's a lot easier to move around. So that's the general basic overview. The other thing is when you're doing a resume for an announcement on USA Jobs, you need to make sure that you are tailoring that resume to that particular announcement you're applying to. So you might have a base resume that has all of your information, your basic information, everything that you need to have. And then every time there's an announcement that opens up, first of all, you got to look and make sure you meet the qualifications. The key for that is the specialized experience statement and or education, because certain jobs require certain degrees, but there aren't as many that require the education. It's more about the experience. So you'll find a job out there that says need at least 52 weeks at the equivalent to the next lower level doing X, Y, Z. When you go to do that resume, make sure you spell out specifically how you have done X, Y, Z. Don't be like, oh yeah, I did that in my position as a company commander. I'm just going to throw it. I was a company commander over this many people. That doesn't tell them anything. You need to say that you trained, you developed, you tracked metrics, you did all of these specific things that are in that announcement. It can get a little bit tedious. However, there are some resources out there that help with that. OneNet, which I know they kind of talked about last week, that has a lot of resources for helping translate your military to civilian, and it also helps for writing those federal resumes. On USA Jobs, they have some YouTube videos out there that talk you through how to write a resume and how to do all these things. There's some really good resources that are available. And they also have a template on there that if you follow it and put in that information, it will help you through the process. The number one thing that gets people knocked out of consideration for positions is either they don't elaborate or they don't provide the details on their resume to include if it was full-time or part-time. Each announcement will have a little blurb about what specifically needs to be there. And if you can show you can pay attention to detail and you have the skill set, that will get you through the door to get looked at and then maybe get in front of a hiring manager.
So question for you, like a GS5 is sort of an entry-level role, yes. Right?
Correct.
So what do you think the average resume length is on one of those entry-level types of jobs?
So some of those GS5 level ones, I've seen 1 or 2 pagers that just kind of have a couple highlights, but they'll typically have 1 or 2 positions. They'll usually show that, graduated high school or got a GED or maybe a little bit of education, and then they'll have about 1 paragraph about what they did. And that's the other thing, especially at the entry level, you don't have to have a 10, 15 page resume as long as what you do have is substantive. You just don't want to have a lot of fluff in there if you're going to try and make it shorter. If you're going to make it shorter, you got to make sure that you've got those details in there.
So it is safe to say when you're applying for a federal job, covering every square on the bingo card is an absolute must, right?
Absolutely.
And if that takes 2 pages or 200 pages, I'd hate to be the fellow getting the 200-page resume. But what you're saying is that's just kind of how that game is played over on that side of the house, right?
Yes, that is correct. And if you want to make friends of your HR specialists and even the hiring managers, because I've filled both roles, if you do have one of those longer resumes, put the experience that's directly related to the position you're applying to first. It's okay to highlight, even if it was about 10 years ago and you want to go backwards, whatever, because that's another thing is recency doesn't matter in federal. It matters that you have the skill set and that you've done it before. That's what really matters. So if you want to reach back to 3-4 jobs ago, but it's directly related, throw that up front. Let us see that on the first page so that we can see that, yeah, there's something here, because there's nothing more annoying as an HR specialist to have to read through 35 pages to find the paragraph on page 36 that's actually relevant to the position you're applying to.
Hey, Jana, can I ask you a question kind of on that same topic?
Mhm.
So could you elaborate a little bit? Because for most of us, we're thinking, okay, you send a resume, you go through it, you check the box. What do you view from the federal standpoint when you as a hiring manager are reviewing these? You know,
So there's a couple things that go into play. It depends, there's always that force structure planning of whether you're wanting to bring in somebody that you want to groom. If you have some younger staff and you need somebody that's going to come in and hit the ground running, you got to kind of, look at what you've got on your team, but then you also are looking at somebody who's got something that's going to come in that's going to translate well. So for me in HR, if you've got a lot of information that you've used computer systems, that you've talked about, that you know how to write, you know how to deal with customers that are difficult, those are things that are going to jump out to me. I don't care if you can lift 300 pounds. I need to know that you can deal with an angry customer and that you can write coherently and that you have good oral communication skills as well to be able to de-escalate a situation and provide that customer service. The other thing is we do actually hire a lot of military in our job because there's a lot of regulations and a lot of interpreting regulations that comes into being in HR and even just being in the federal government in general. So that's another skill that I like to see, is that you have that ability to research and analyze and draw conclusions based on regulations, policies, or laws. So those are types of the things that I look for. Also, sometimes you get that gut feeling when you kind of read through a resume. Sometimes you can just kind of see a path somebody's been on, or you can just kind of see some skills that kind of resonate throughout different positions, whether they're directly related or not. And sometimes that just, I want to take a chance, I'm gonna at least give them an interview and see how that goes. So some of it's, some intuition, but there are some things that I also look for. And a lot of it is you tell that story in that resume.
Here's a question for you.
Mhm.
Networking, does that help at all in the federal sphere?
Yes, networking does help in the federal sphere. It's not the same as the private sector, but it does help. The other things that help is there are certain things, especially if you're a disabled veteran, there are some special things out there for announcements, like our agency. If you are what's considered a 10-point veteran, which means that you are a disabled veteran, compensable from the VA, 0% or higher, you're still compensable. You can actually reach out to the agency ahead of time to get added to a list that anytime an announcement goes out that fits the criteria of what you're looking for, they'll send you an email and say, hey, by the way, this job is being announced tomorrow. Go ahead and take a look at it. If you're interested, go ahead and apply. There's also things you can do to set up online through USA Jobs to be able to have things sent to you as well on a weekly or daily basis as you're doing your search. There's a lot of tools that are out there, but I will tell you that if you happen to know somebody that works at the agency you're getting ready to apply to, that can help. If you can say, hey, I saw this announcement, I threw it out there, what do you think? Give me some feedback about where the places you work. What's the culture like? What are some other things? Would you be willing to put in a good word for me? I mean, it's not going to guarantee anything because obviously you still have to get on the cert, you have to get through all that stuff. But if it comes down to it that, you put as a reference somebody that works in our office that has a good reputation, I'm probably going to go and talk to them and say, hey, so-and-so listed you. What can you tell me about them? And if they say run for the hills, you probably don't want to list them as a reference for you. But if you've got a good rapport with that person and you've worked with them before and there's somebody that can put in a good word for you, it can help when you're like at that point of considering for position or not. It's not going to help you get your foot in the door, but it's going to help you at that decision point of when you're looking at, you've got person A or person B, and you're torn between the two of them, and person A, you know, has a good reference from somebody that you've worked with and you trust. That's going to hold some value.
So question for you. We've had a lot of guys over the last couple of years come in and take like a VSO job, not a VSO, VSR job or whatever, in hopes to be able to navigate within the federal system. Could you kind of explain what that career pathing looks like for these guys that are just looking to get their foot in the door, how that might be a good way to get started for some people?
We actually have had quite a few VSRs that have actually come to our office. It helps them get their foot in the door. Again, like those customer service skills, a lot of those things that translate, it helps you get in there. The VA is a great place to get your foot in the door in general. The one thing I will tell people that are looking at moving around within the federal is, just because you were a GS9 or a GS11 in one particular job, that doesn't mean that that automatically equates to a GS9 or GS11 in another series, another job. It's the same as like an MOS. You're not going to have somebody who is, you know, combat engineer that's an E6 that's suddenly thrown into a logistics position and expecting them to know everything. They're probably going to have to, you know, take a step back a little bit, learn a little bit underneath them, and then get back in there. They're still going to have those leadership skills, those things, but there's a little bit of a step back first. And that's the one thing that I've seen a lot of people, they're like, well, but I'm a GS11. I don't want to take a GS9. Well, the GS9 position we have has a target grade 12. So after you're as a 9, as long as you're doing a good job, you'll be an 11. Another year, you'll be a 12. So sometimes you have to take a step back to go forward, but it does help you get in there and kind of make that path for you. Just don't be afraid to take a step back before you move back up. That's the one piece of advice I'd give people, because sometimes they're scared to take that step back, but in the long run, it's going to have more of a career path for you.
So before you ask that question, Zach, I've got my cousin trolling us a little bit in here. Anybody that wants to work for the State Patrol of Minnesota, reach out to Bobby Boucher or myself, the water boy, right? But you know what? Here's evidence that anybody can get into the State Patrol. This guy was an MP in the Marine Corps. And he said his favorite flavor is red. So, okay. Zach, do you want to make the comment that you put in the chat?
No, I just was hoping, like, so Jana, like, obviously, like, I'm a product of going through the VA and changing careers, and can you speak to how, like, Connect 700 works on the federal side? It's just, you were starting to talk about prioritization and stuff like that, but can you elaborate and kind of explain, if you're going through, it's no longer voc rehab, it's VRNE. I know that acronym has now changed, but if you're going through something like that, or using the VA and voc rehab services, I used it myself, but if just talking about Connect 700 as it relates to the federal side of things.
So we don't really utilize that terminology, but there are some programs that do help connect into positions. There's also a lot of Department of Labor does apprentice positions and jobs that also work closely with the VA for a lot of those things. We actually have an apprenticeship in our office that I actually am the one who actually manages that apprenticeship program for our office. So there are ways to get pathways in there. And if you've been through like a DOL training program, there's a lot of things that they help you get your foot in the door. It's not the only way, but it is one way to get through that. And it does help with some of that prioritization and, you know, getting you ahead of some other people on some of those lists. There's also some really cool enhancements that they're working on with USA Jobs that I'm a little skeptical but excited about, that they're looking at in the future, connecting with the VA to where veterans do not have to attach their own documents, that you can go in the system and you can do your stuff, and the VA will provide that information over for veterans that have special hiring authorities and things like that. So, I mean, it's kind of new. It's kind of, I'm curious to see how it's going to work with everything talking together, but they are doing a lot of things across the government to try and link and find opportunities for veterans.
Yeah, I did see some of that. I grew up doing commercial construction, residential remodeling, and then I switched over. I wanted to do something where I could work with veterans, and it worked out where I went through vocational rehab services at the VA and was able to work with them. And it actually helps there because any of their programs, they know what's going on internally at that VA or within the healthcare system in that state. So that's always a great resource, I know firsthand. And they have their ears out with a lot of the networking stuff that we do. And I think that can be helpful for just different pathways to go into this stuff. But yeah, I do know that the federal side of things, or even just state level, county level, it's a whole different fish.
Yep. The other thing that I will tell people is if you've been applying to jobs and you're getting non-referral notices, you can call up that HR specialist that had that announcement and you can ask them for input on why you weren't on the certificate. Now, don't call them, don't be a jerk, don't be screaming at them, demanding that you know you're qualified, but you can
pay your
always
salary.
reach out and ask for, guidance about, hey, I wasn't referred to for this. Can you tell me what I was missing? And they might tell you that, it looked like you had some good stuff, but we just couldn't tell because you didn't elaborate, or you looked like you were great, but you didn't put any hours on your resume. You didn't tell us how long you'd worked there. We knew you'd done it for a day. That's really all we could tell. So, I mean, some of that is through trial and error as you're doing that. I highly recommend you reach out to those people because we're happy to provide input and help people understand how to navigate the system. Just don't yell at us and scream at us. That's all I ask.
Dang.
I bet that's never happened.
Oh, no, never.
Okay, so we're kind of at our wrap-up point here. So one thing, I forgot to put this on the front end. If you're watching this, invite some friends. Just get some good, solid bets here and some additional help, okay? Out of 22 million, we're not even a measurable group against that many vets in the U.S. So just invite 5 today. Then invite 5 more that are cool. And then 5 more that are kind of borderline grumpy guys, which is probably 3/4 of your list on Facebook. Anyway, so focus on attention to detail, right, Jana? That's probably number 1. Big thing too is get a good solid referral. I don't want to speak too high about Zach Johnson, but this guy is one of the hardest working employment guys in this town that works for vets. Known him for a couple of years now. He'll pick up the phone at weird hours and stuff like that. I mean, he needs to learn how to disconnect if you ask me, but Zach is very, very well connected here in town and should be able to be a really good point of contact. Plus, you guys got some basic resume services over there at MacV, right, Zach?
Yep, we absolutely do. Yeah, we've got a resume writing class on Tuesdays and Fridays from noon to 2. And we've got a lot of myself and my team throughout the whole state of Minnesota. We're always helpful. Even if you don't live in the state of Minnesota, I'll pick up the phone. Happy to help out. Look me up on LinkedIn.
So here's a couple new contacts for you for federal stuff. The Battle Buddy page is loaded with vets who work for the federal government. And it's very rare. I don't know if I've ever seen it actually, where somebody doesn't respond directly to someone saying, hey, hit me up, I'll help you out. So always ask for help on the page if you need help getting in. There's a lot of federal people here. USAjobs.gov. To me, it's nails on the chalkboard as far as seeing that. It's like, don't just post the link to the page, guys. Be willing to raise your hand and say, I will actually help you get your foot in the door or look at your resume or whatever, because we all know how to use Google or DuckDuckGo is what I've been using these days to find USA jobs, But the key is to get yourself in the best possible position to get that call for an interview. Okay, so Pete.
Yo.
What do you suggest for these people this week if they're looking at federal jobs?
I think Jana hit it on the head with regard to resume. Speaking to the resume thing a little bit. It still helps to have the challenge, action, result baked into your bullet points. You know what I mean? The more you can tell in the less space, of course, the better your chances. Now, the federal resumes are I think, and Jana, you can confirm or deny, but they're kind of offhandedly designed to make everybody look the same, so that there's this impression of fairness going on, but you can still differentiate yourself in how you explain and communicate your value.
Yeah, there is some standardization, but there's still abilities to stand out and, show that you have different things. And there's no one format that's necessarily one way better than another, as long as you have all the information, which is why if you're starting out, I recommend using the format they have on USA Jobs, just because it kind of helps you get in that frame of reference and making sure you're hitting everything. But I see multiple different styles that come through, and multiple styles work. It's more about selling yourself and helping us understand what it is that you truly bring to the table, not just a couple of buzzwords that you might do on a shorter resume.
Zach, you've been dabbling with this a bit. Any
Yeah,
good hints for the week?
it's, just taking the time, go over it, have more than one person look at it who's in your inner circle, a friend who you trust, a family member, one of us in this group, whoever you need help with, and get multiple eyes on it. But if you got to take a look at the resume, put it down for a second, go do something else, whatever, come back to it and really take your time with it, because a lot of the keywords, Jana had mentioned ONET earlier, phenomenal website to be using to really go for keywords and to target specific jobs. And that's based on what you did with your MOS. And again, happy to help people with that and navigating that.
Sue?
One thing that I heard that sounds very consistent, regardless of whether you're applying to a federal job or to a civilian job, is making sure that along with the challenge action result is that it's quantifiable. If it's vague, you're going to get it put into that no category. And please, please, please run a spell check on your resume.
Yeah.
Yes.
Grammarly has a free service which will get you to about the high school level of grammar, which is non-crayon friendly. Sarah, any words of wisdom for this week for these guys?
I would say don't get discouraged and don't give up. I actually tried applying for some jobs in Minnesota when I transitioned out of active duty through USA Jobs. I didn't have any resources behind me. I was an officer. I thought I knew everything, and very quickly got non-referrals, was maybe overshooting what my capabilities were, didn't understand the system. So don't be afraid to try it. Stick with it. Reach out to us on Battle Buddies and get some help. All these resources are available to each and every one of you. If that's the career path you want, we can help you get that job. Just reach out to us, and don't get discouraged with non-referrals. Do what Jana said, follow up with the HR specialist, figure out what went wrong. It's going to be your easiest way to get a better resume on the next one, and just keep going, keep going, keep going.
Jana, final words of wisdom.
The final thing I'll say is pay attention to that specialized experience statement. I can't tell you how many people try and argue with me and say, no, it's the KSAs, it's the KSAs. I am a person who actually reviews the resumes, does qualifications. I'm telling you right now, the KSAs are things that you want to look at to make sure of, when you're prepping for that interview, because those are the things they're going to be looking at. But to get it in front of the hiring manager to show that you truly meet the requirements for the position, the specialized experience, it's back to like the foot stomp days. If I have one thing to say, make sure you're looking at that specialized experience statement and that you're making sure that your resume clearly shows how you meet that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight, Jana. Really appreciate you giving the perspective. So guys, I will put Jana's LinkedIn contact up. She claims that she is a LinkedIn ghost, I guess would be a good way to put it. So if she doesn't respond to you for a year or two, don't feel bad. You may have luck though. We've got contacts all over the world that work for the federal government on this page now with 50,000 people. So just ask for help. That's what the page was designed for. So
Yep.
Post your questions. Everybody's got, all you Blue Falcons out there, 5 people right now. Get in your invite. Just click the little invite thing. Send it. Send it. That's all I got to say about that. All right. Good evening. Cut it to 28 minutes. Sue, are you proud of us?
Nice work, everybody.
Yes. Okay. All right. Have a good evening, everybody.
All right. See you.